Welcome to Script to Screen's Talks podcast. Script to Screen is a charitable organisation dedicated to developing the craft and culture of storytelling for the screen in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Part of our annual program, the Talks series, brings the creative community together to hear inspirational speakers delve into their creative process, craft, philosophy, or the broader creative landscape. Script to Screen has partnered with the New Zealand International Film Festival to bring you a special series of talks with the filmmakers at the 2017 festival. Max Currie chats candidly with British filmmaker Francis Lee about his experience of making his first feature film, God's Own Country. Regarded as one of the most assured, fully formed British debuts of recent years, Francis Lee is a filmmaker to watch.
Congratulations on a beautiful film, and not only for what you did, but also for what you didn't do. Johnny lives. He doesn't wind up tragically alone. He gets the guy, and the gays take over the farm. We know they're going to start like a boutique cheese business any day now. The ending is hopeful. Was that your intention from the start going in, or did you discover that ending?
Thank you very much, Max, and thank you everybody for coming down these stairs and coming here. Yes, I love hope, and I felt that those two characters worked incredibly hard for that ending. I think that Johnny went through this great big transformation for him, and it would have been perverse not to allow him to have got some kind of some hope from what he'd been through. So it was always going to end that way.
God's Own Country is getting compared a lot to Ang Lee's Brokeback Mountain. But for my 2 cents, I mean, you make Ang Lee look like a city slicker hawking cliched postcards. I mean, we never saw Jake Gyllenhaal with his arm up a cow's bum, and your film is just covered in the piss and shit and spit and mucus of animal husbandry. What role, I mean, this gave it such texture. What's going on with all these bodily fluids? Can you talk about those for a second?
So I guess, I grew up, as I said earlier, I grew up on a very similar situation. My dad is a sheep farmer, and my whole world was about not just the shit and the piss and the spit, but also about the circle of life. So it was very much about birth, life, death, and that was very much part and parcel of the world. And when I started to think about making this film, I knew that I wanted to tell a very truthful, authentic story. And so the poor boys I sent out to work on farms for 2 weeks. And
you mean the actors, yeah?
The actors. Yeah. And they worked long shifts. They did like 9-10 hours a day. And they learned how to do everything, because I knew I never wanted a stunt double or a hand double. And they would have to learn how to do everything.
That was a real surprise to me, incidentally. You know, so all the birthing of the sheep, you know, the swinging of the little lambs. You know,
yeah, that's all the boys. They learned how to do everything. Alec worked with my dad, the guy who played Georgi, and Josh, who played Johnny, worked with the farmer whose farm we shot on. It was just really important to me to make sure that as a viewer, I hate being pulled out of a film when I see any fakery. And for me, as a viewer, I knew I never wanted to be pulled out of this film. I just wanted to go on this immersive journey. So they were good boys, and they learned everything.
Yeah. Just so that everyone's kind of seated now, we're just going to let you know that in about 20 minutes, we'll be taking questions from the floor. But definitely one of the perks of this job is that I get to ask all the questions of Francis first. So have a think. If there's anything that you want to know, we'll be rolling out some microphones shortly. This is a Script to Screen event as well as a New Zealand International Film Festival event, so we're partly interested in the craft. Can you tell us a little bit about the writing process? Was it long and arduous? We've had dinner. I know he'd belted this one out. So.
No, I hate typing. I'm rubbish at typing. I can only type with one finger. So anything that makes that process really short is really good for me. So I thought about it, and I planned it all out in my head for about 6 months, and I worked out who these guys were, what they were about, what the beginning was, what the middle was, what the end was. And then I wrote it in 4 days, and then kind of did bits and bobs with it, but 4 days.
Yeah, if there's any filmmakers in the audience, they're spewing. Right, 4 days, Christ. Yeah, I want to just before we get more into process. I mean, it's such a privilege after seeing a film to come and have the living, breathing filmmaker that this all sprang from here, and I thought it'd be interesting just to sort of play a game of decoding. I've written a few moments from the film, and so what you can give us is kind of what they mean to you.
Okay.
And maybe they don't mean anything. But
okay.
So what are you seeing, experiencing from these moments?
Sure.
So I've got shooting a dead calf.
Yeah. So for me, or for the character?
No, for you, because this is what's kind of cool about a Q&A.
So again, I love the life. The circle of life and the practicalities of farm life, and so I grew up in a situation where if there was a sick animal, if it was that kind of situation, it didn't make any economic sense to get the vet, because whatever money you spent on the vet, you would never get back from the sale of that calf when it was big and fat. So you shot it, and so it just felt very practical to me.
Mum and her ironing board.
Grandma.
Yeah. Okay.
Her and her ironing board, I guess. So for me, it was coming from a family they're not particularly demonstrative. They don't tell you all the time that they love you and that you're amazing. But they always make sure that your washing is done and your ironing is done, and there's always a hot meal.
Yeah.
And so it was that practical side of love.
Yeah, lovely. Being handed a pair of gloves.
Again, that comes down to the practical side of love, that care, that kind of, rather than going, oh, no, you'll get chilly, love, and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, put these on.
Yeah. I'm spitting on a cut hand.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of spit. and bodily fluid, generally. And I've just remembered this is being recorded. And I thought it was quite hot. I think spit's quite hot, sorry.
I was curious, is that sort of something that happens often on the farm? Is it disinfectant, or was it just something that was it from his Romanian background?
Yeah, I felt it was from his Romanian background. I felt he was really practical.
So you made this up?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So I felt he was really practical and he wanted to clean that cut.
Yeah.
So he spat on it.
Yeah. Wow. Giving someone a sponge bath.
Oh, yeah. So, so in my family, I've got a very close member of the family who's very disabled, and the physical care that goes into looking after that person is quite tough.
Yeah. Last one, a table set for two with 2 cans of beer.
Romance. I mean, what more do you want?
Oh, so I was wondering, was this directly lifted from your life, or?
I might have put glasses on.
Yeah.
Romance.
Yeah, cool. Do you, if you're asked to describe this film, do you say that it's a gay film?
No. I say it's about love.
Yeah.
I say it is about somebody discovering how hard it is to be vulnerable and open enough to love and be loved.
Mm-hmm. Were there, when you were growing up, are there any gay characters or stories that, for better or for worse, kind of really impacted on you? What were some of those? Can you remember?
My godparents were gay.
Right.
And we're a couple for 50 years. Right. Their relationship was kind of a beacon, really, of positivity and hope and love. Also, my Uncle Brian, who was a friend of my dad's, who was a painter and decorator, he was gay and lived with my other uncle Brian.
They were both called Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about in film and TV?
Growing up?
Yeah.
I mean, this probably won't translate, I don't know, because you probably don't have these shows here.
Try us.
So there was a roving reporter called Alan Wicker, and
Is this familiar to anyone in the audience? Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. Right, okay, great.
Awesome.
So this guy was British, and he'd go all around the world and send reports back. Yeah. And I remember in the 70s when I was a kid watching on TV something he did from San Francisco about the gay guys in San Francisco that felt quite important at the time. I didn't quite know why. And
how old were you around this time when you watched
this? 8 or 9. Yeah. And then also in the 80s, early 80s, I guess early to mid 80s, Film 4 was starting out, and it was funding incredible queer stories like My Beautiful Laundrette and Another Country, Prick Up Your Ears, and those things were on the TV.
Awesome. I mean, having seen this film, I've got to ask, Francis, what was it like for you coming out on, growing up on a farm and being in this very sort of severe, quite masculine environment?
So dull, really dull. It was really boring. I told my dad, and I told him because I was in love with someone, and I was not having a good time, and I said, "Oh, Dad, I have to tell you something. I'm in love." And he went, "Okay." And I went, "But it's with a man, not a woman." And I cried, and he just held me until I stopped crying, and then said, "You're mine, and I love you."
That's not dull, Francis.
It's quite dull.
That's lovely.
I want the whole rejection thing, but I never got it.
It was more pathos to draw on for your writing.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
So you were shortchanged.
I know,
with all that paternal love.
God,
you were fucked over.
No struggle.
Yeah. So even though the writing of this film came together in a gallingly short period, were there any different permutations for the stories or the characters or the ending? What sort of things did you try on? What never happened that you can tell us about?
Okay, so the first version of this script, the only difference in terms of what you've seen and what the first version of the script was, is that the Georgi character was called Kevin, and he was from Leicester.
That's it.
Yeah. And then, and I was working, I'd given up acting, so I had no money. And I was working in a scrapyard and to earn money. And I was working with this guy who'd come from Romania to the UK to find work and to better his life for him and his wife. And we became really good friends. And I was appalled and ashamed of the reaction that he'd had from the UK. And this xenophobia, but I was amazed by how he coped with it emotionally and physically. And at that point, I was like, Kevin from Leicester just isn't cutting it. And he should be from Romania and should bring more of that into it. So I changed that character.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about casting. How did you find these incredible actors? And how do you... Okay, I'll one question at a time, Max. How did you find them?
So I worked with casting directors because I knew no Romanian actors and I knew no actors under about 40. And so I worked with brilliant casting directors, one in the UK and one in Romania. And with Josh, who plays Johnny, he was just on the list. And I liked the look of him, but he was working in Corfu. He was doing a TV show.
So, like the look of him, the first thing you saw was like a headshot.
Yeah. I just I liked his ears.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we sent some scenes for him to record and then send back so I could look at them. And I got these scenes back, and I was utterly convinced he was from the north, from Yorkshire or somewhere like that. The accent was so great. And then he had delivered such an incredible kind of emotionally repressed reading. He just seemed to instinctively understand the role. But I foolishly thought, well, he must be just playing himself, because I was convinced. And a couple of weeks later, he was in London, so I met him. He came into the office, and he was the antithesis of that person. He's from the south of England. He's very middle class. He's very funny and smiley and joyful and really beautiful. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, God, what am I going to do now? But then we started to work in the room, and I realized he was a totally transformative actor, that he's a shapeshifter, and he can literally transform himself. And that just totally turned me on. And he had incredible hands. I love hands. And he had these huge meat plate hands, which I thought were really cool. And he wanted to work the same way I wanted to work, which was to build a character, to start from scratch, to make it very character-driven. So he was great. So we cast him. And then I got sent a whole load of tapes from Romania to begin with, and Alec, who plays Georgi, was one of those. And again, he just really nailed something. There was just some seed, some kernel of what that character was about. But he had a terrible haircut. He was in a play version of Fight Club, and he'd got half his head shaved, and like this terrible hair over here. So I was a bit like, But then I went to Romania, and I met him, and embarrassingly, I couldn't look him in the eye. He was so handsome. And again, a very intelligent actor and a transformative actor. So he was always my favorite. But I knew this film was going to live or die by the chemistry. Yeah. So I'd cast Josh, and I lined up my top three favorite Romanian actors, and flew them to the UK, and then worked with them in pairs. And I loved Alec and Josh. They just really hit it off. But actors are clever, and if I'm in the room, if the director's in the room, they might be like just pretending. Yeah. So I sent them off to have a cup of tea in the break, and then I just hid around the corner and watched them. And they were hitting it off. Yeah. Right.
So, because I was going to ask, are you able to, as a director, to nurture, manufacture, encourage chemistry, or your strategy was like it needs to be there from the start?
I think it's hard. I mean, I don't think it's impossible, but I think I didn't want to give myself extra difficulty. Yeah. And these two were my favorite, and they did get on the best. So, everything just fell into place.
What role does the actor's own sexuality play in helping them play these characters believably?
It was something I never investigated. Yeah. It was a question I never asked, and I never worried about. It was something that I love, the craft of acting. I believe in the craft of acting. And so, I felt that I was very upfront about what they would have to do and how we were going to do that.
Some questions about that too.
But it was a question I never asked and have never asked.
I mean, in terms of the challenging, by the way, guys, we're getting close to that point where we're going to put the mics out there. I mean, what was filming the love scenes like with these guys, the sex scenes?
Yeah, it was surprisingly incredibly easy.
Yeah, okay.
So I had worked with both actors, I think, for 3 months before the shoot. So I built this great relationship with them, this trusting bond. And the sex scenes were the only things we rehearsed. And we choreographed them like a dance. So they had moves. And then we spent a lot of time rehearsing them. And then when it came to shooting them, I just did like 1 or 2 takes and did it very kind of quickly. And the DP, one of the reasons I really wanted to work with him was not only was he an artist in his own right as a DP, but he was a lovely, lovely man. And I knew this camera was going to be so up close and personal with these boys that the person operating that camera had to be someone they could trust and have a bond with. And so that worked really well.
My kind of like stupid question is, I mean, do you have to sit down and have a conversation with these men about bearing all for the camera. How does that conversation go? Is it tricky or?
No, because you do it when you're casting. Well, I did it when I was casting. So every boy I met, I had this. It was almost like a script where I was like, so I want to be really upfront and honest about what we're going to do, and blah 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 blah. And so right from the get-go, if there was anybody who was going to be uncomfortable with that, they'd get weeded out.
Okay. I'm also really curious about casting. It was a smaller role, but the guy that Johnny fucks right at the start of the movie, and what was casting that like? Because it's a small role, kind of a high risk role in a way. And was that actor's big break on screen, or?
I mean, I don't know. Like he's a lovely man. He's called Harry Lister Smith, and he's a lovely boy. Lots of people came in for that role. No, it was unfortunate that obviously because it was a small role and because I shot the film chronologically, the first scene he did really was that scene, and so he kind of turned up on set and was like, "Okay, so do you want to just get in and bend over?" And no, I think he was really happy to do it.
So it turns out the sex scenes were actually really easy to shoot because you rehearsed them so thoroughly. What was the scene or the scenes that gave you nightmares? What was the most difficult scene to get right?
I think it was that scene when Johnny goes to the potato farm in Scotland, and there's that scene with him and Georgie outside. That was tough. That was really tough because we'd had to travel there and shoot all the coach scenes as we all travelled. All the crew came on that coach. Right. So we had to shoot that, and then we got there and the light was going and it was raining. It was just miserable. And the boys were so primed for it, but also nervous of that scene. And so I think it was that. It was tough. I found it tough, that scene. But that scene actually is all shot in one take. So both of the boys just did one take of it, and which obviously was great. But it was emotionally tough because I shot chronologically. It was right at the end. We were all really tired. It was a big emotional thing. Yeah, that one. I'll stop. Yeah.
No, but yeah, I mean, you got that magic in the bottle with it. I mean, it really, really got me. Can you tell us about any, those like lucky accidents or those kind of off-camera disasters? I mean, are there any sort of just tales from set of spooky coincidences or stuff that happened we'd never know about without asking you?
Not anything really you see on camera. I'm boringly, I'm really controlling and precise and planned and orchestrated. Josh got very sick. That was not good. So Josh got a terrible stomach bug about in week 4 of a 6-week shoot, and I spent 8 hours in A&E with him on a drip, and then spent 5 days looking after him. And he was very poorly, so we had to shut down, and that wasn't a lot of fun.
Okay. Hey guys, we're ready to take some questions from you now. So if you can just raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you, so everyone can hear your question. Is it someone raising their hand there, or just having a scratch? Yeah, sir. Yeah, can we get this man a microphone?
Hi.
Hi.
Does Nana move out?
Pardon?
Does Nana move out?
No, God no. Who's going to do the washing?
Hi, I really love the film. Congratulations. I was just wondering, this is your first feature film, right? So were there any filmmakers that you personally looked up to or tried to emulate in some way in this film?
Yeah, I was just saying to Max, me and Max sneaked off and had some beers. But I was saying to Max, over the beers, I'm not a great, I don't have a great knowledge of filmmakers. My references are a little bit rubbish. But the filmmakers I love would be like the Dardenne brothers or Jacques Audiard or Mike Leigh. Those are the kind of people I really love.
What's your favourite film, Francis?
Okay. My favourite film is Working Girl.
Awesome.
Because it is the best film ever made in the world.
Down the back there, on the aisle. Hey.
Hi, Francis.
Hi.
Love the movie. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
If you made it again, which don't need to, but is there any part, if you could, is there anything you would change or do differently?
You know, I was really lucky that I was allowed to make this film the way in which I wanted to make it, and I could have only made it this way. There is one thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to tell you.
Go on.
But
Go on.
So Ian Hart, who plays Martin, the dad, I think that I would have chosen different costumes.
Did he dress himself?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
That was me.
That was
and
you,
I think
okay.
it was a mistake. Yeah.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Yes.
How did you choose your director of photography?
Oh, well, so I had a terrible embarrassment of riches with cinematographers, and I won't name names, but I had like this list of about 5 people who I loved and sent the script, and incredibly, they all came back and said, yes, we want to do it. And these are big European famous cinematographers. I'd narrowed it down, and I knew which one I thought I was going to go with. And then I went to see a film called Songs My Brother Taught Me at the London Film Festival, and just totally fell in love with the way it looked and the way in which the camera moved, and thought, shit, I want to work with this person. And so I got in touch with him, and we got talking, and his response to the material and his response to me and our relationship and his aesthetic just was incredible. And but he'd shot one feature at that point, and so it didn't feel like a risk, but people made me feel like it was a risk. But I fought for him and got him, and I think he did an incredible job.
So just next to you there, and then from someone at the front.
Hi,
Hi.
the proximity of the city seemed to be quite a contradiction for me, because this kind of story we tend to associate with very remote areas where there's a paucity of emotion and very spare lifestyle, very connected to the land and so forth. And yet it seemed, and by the way you're shaking your head, I presume it's quite deliberate, that in many, many shots of the farm, the city lights were just tantalisingly close. And so he could have had a different lifestyle so easily, but there was something that kept him tied to the farm. I mean, do you want to explain
Yes,
a little more?
absolutely. You're quite right, sir. It was very deliberate. For me, it was important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I love the idea of the town encroaching on the farm and rural life, and how this life is being eroded massively because of the expansion of towns and the urban sprawl. But secondly, it was super important that yes, you're quite right, he could have just gone and experienced it, but he couldn't, because he was so emotionally closed off, and he couldn't make that leap. When he talks about going out in Bradford, that's like a 10-minute car ride away. You know, but he can't quite get there. And so it was himself who was preventing a different life.
Cool. Yes, we have a question here.
Hi.
Hi.
What was the thought process behind the lack of music in the film?
So I really wanted the soundtrack to be the soundscape of the natural world, and I worked incredibly hard on that sound. And the sound is, I could bore you for hours about the sound. It's incredibly orchestrated. The wind sounds are all specifically chosen. The birds are very specific and specifically placed for various reasons. And I wanted to build this world without music, in a sense, because I live on that hill, and so those sounds are so totally present, and for me evoke kind of emotion and feeling and stuff. So I didn't want to have a score.
Francis, one of the things that I found fascinating you mentioned over dinner was that Georgi had his own wind sound. Do you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what Georgi brings with him, whenever you see Georgi in the film, he has his own wind sound. And you know, and it was a very specific sound. And then when he leaves, the wind stays, almost like this chorus reminding Johnny of this space that has been created because he's gone and stuff. Yeah, so there's lots of things like that in the soundscape that clearly only I know.
But yeah, I think our audience feels them, for sure. Hi, we've got a question from the far corner.
Hello, thank you. Hi, Francis.
Hi.
Just my question is about the name, God's Own Country.
Oh, yeah.
And just how you came to that, because I don't know if you know, but New Zealand is kind of known as God's own country.
Yeah.
And so the connection is kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, it's so Yorkshire also is known as God's own country, as is Kerala and parts of Australia and America. There are lots of places, weirdly. But I loved it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it was a phrase that I'd grown up hearing all the time and very proud Yorkshire person. But also for me, it felt like something that, you know, like for me, it kind of explains that thing of heaven or happiness can be a place where you create it yourself. You can endow it yourself. But I think New Zealand is God's own country. I think it's lovely.
You've had a good time in Wellington.
I love Wellington. Yeah.
Ma'am?
Oh, and Auckland is really nice.
Yeah.
Kia ora, nau mai, haere mai ki Aotearoa. I just wanted to say welcome to New Zealand.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to come and see this film not because of the plot, but because it was called God's Own Country. Although my life is the plot.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Wow.
I wanted to also say that this film struck me as really authentic because I grew up on a farm.
Okay.
I come from a farming background, and someone said that farming, New Zealand farmers were, masculine and it was tough and stuff. Well, I grew up on a farm. It was a farm run by Māori, my grandfather, and there was a lot of love and a lot of affection, and that was demonstrated not just by me getting a bicycle or a new horse, but I think it's a different culture. So when in New Zealand, we're not all like that. And in fact, I don't think New Zealanders are like that anyway. But I was looking at Georga skinning the lamb, and I thought, man, this is what happens. Because I've seen that happen on the farm. And the only thing I didn't really like was the poor calf. But it did feel very, very genuine. And from someone from a farming background, thank you very much for that.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
Yeah, Francis, in general, I mean, what kind of responses have you received from farmers and the farming communities around the world? Is there any of them that sort of stand out to you?
I mean, like the only ones I think who've seen it are like this film has been shown in lots of cosmopolitan urban, areas. But my dad and some of his farming friends came to see it in the UK, and they really loved it. They really loved it. They were very emotional about it. It was very positive.
Awesome. Any other questions from the audience here? Hello again.
The videos at the end of the movie, are they personal, like home memories, videos? What's the story behind that, and what's the connection?
Yeah, so I had this thing that when I was an unemployed actor and I'd sit at home watching daytime TV, and there was this show, again, I don't know if you get this show here, it was called Escape to the Country, and it was all these people who were leaving towns and things and going, oh, we're in the country, it's so amazing and lovely, and I've got all these happy people farming. And it just wasn't my experience at all, I just saw it as cold and wet and muddy and miserable. And so I really loved the juxtaposition of putting something in the film that kind of that kind of does that thing of going, look at it, isn't it pastoral and bucolic and amazing and Yeah, and so those, no, they're not my family would never have been able to afford a camera. So they're from Lincolnshire, which is a county in the UK, and they're 1950s archive footage.
We've got time for maybe one or two more questions. I just want to ask, what has making this film revealed about yourself to you? Like, what do you know about yourself now that you didn't know when you started making it?
That's a really good question, Max. No, well, no. I think that what have I learned? I guess just to keep going, not to give up, to learn the power of no. That was quite a good one. Not to give up, just to keep going and not to think too far ahead. Just work moment to moment and not always be so quick.
And undertaking this massive project, did it come at any personal cost? I mean, what did you have to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it did. Okay.
Yeah.
And just before we ask do you want to elaborate on what that was, or prefer not to? I mean, I just think that there's such massive endeavours, there's such sacrifices.
Yeah, but nobody wants to hear the rubbish bit, do they?
I do.
That's
Well, what did it take to make this film? I mean, because there's a story behind that in terms of
There's just, if anybody is going to do something that they haven't done before, there's a certain amount of self-sacrifice, I think, and a certain amount of willingness to put yourself on the line and commit to something, this film has done incredibly well. I could not be happier. And so if I sat here and said, I haven't earned any money in 3 years and I haven't had a break in 2 years. No one would care. It's like, they'd be like, oh, so what? Look at your film. It's done really well. We're not going to feel sorry for you. But yeah, there's lots of things that yeah.
Thank you.
No.
What we're about to wrap up. Any more questions? Oh, we've got two. Great. So first we'll hear from the man in the red and white, and then from, yes, Brian.
Francis, thank you. Your talent is our gift.
Oh.
And what's the next film going to be?
Yes, I'm not going to tell you. I'm working on a couple of things at the moment, and that would be all I'm telling you.
Nice try.
It'll be something I've written.
What happens to them? I mean, I know you've done your job as a filmmaker, but just as we wrap up, what do you think are some of the milestones and challenges ahead of these characters? I miss them. I'm interested in them. I want to know what happens to them.
I think it's a really interesting question, and it's not one that I've ever really dwelt on, boringly. My favourite moment in the film is that last moment when they slam the door, because that to me is them going, okay, you've hung out with us, we've shown you a bit of our lives, now fuck off and we'll get on with it. Yeah. And I like that. I think, I think they'll sort themselves out in some way.
Fantastic.
But I do think they make cheese.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I really do.
Yeah.
There was the one thing that I didn't include in the film. There was a whole scene of them tasting the cheese, and it was very beautiful and funny. But it didn't make the cut.
Okay. Francis, it's been a massitive privilege.
Thank you, Matt.
I was flubbed on privilege. Massive privilege meeting you and talking to you and seeing your film. We can just tell by the amount of people that came down here and the questions that are asked, there's a real enthusiasm for it as well. So everyone, please join me in congratulating Francis on this beautiful film.
The Talk series is proudly supported by the New Zealand Film Commission, Foundation North, Images and Sound, and White Studios. Music for the podcast was provided by Poddington Bear, and voiceover is Lucy Wigmore.